Free speech proponents have celebrated Elon Musk's purchase offer for Twitter. Elon's proposed takeover of Twitter represents a seismic shift in the battle over the flow and control of information. The impact from shifting back to the unfettered exchange of ideas online would be enormous, but that impact also did not go unnoticed. For 2 days last week, Twitter relaxed their censorship site-wide, and the effects were immediately noticed, especially among conservatives. But the return to free speech did not last long, and within days, Twitter's oversight was suddenly back. Establishment forces moved quickly to fight back against what they fear most, a return to free speech. Only days after Elon announced his purchase of Twitter, the Department of Homeland Security announced the creation of a new Orwellian disinformation governance board, supposedly to combat so-called misinformation ahead of the 2022 midterms. This new body is being led by the very same people that have spent years spreading disinformation. The current fight over free speech isn't over yet, not by a long shot. Hi everyone, and welcome to Truth Over News with Jeff Carlson and Hans Manke.
The impact of Elon's purchase of Twitter on the pending midterms could be enormous. But it's also worth noting that the closing of the transaction and the timing of the midterms themselves have a remarkable overlap. One thing that has always bothered both Hans and I is the lack of the emergence of a competing bid for Twitter. The DNC has always done a far better job of recognizing the value of media properties and how the reach and narrative control obtained from their ownership has far exceeded any measured financial return. That's exactly why Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. But Elon's bid for Twitter went uncontested. After efforts by Twitter's board to institute a poison pill, an action designed to prevent Elon's takeover, Elon's offer was suddenly accepted. Poor financial results from Twitter's most recent quarter may have been partly to blame. The stock would have surely tumbled without a ready offer for the company. But that still fails to explain the lack of interest from other establishment buyers. After all, Twitter's value has never really resided in its financial statements. Twitter functions as the nation's public square, and the false elevation of some ideas and narratives combined with the active suppression of others has resulted in a direct impact on public discourse and debate. Maintaining control over this public square of political debate has been of immense benefit to Democrats, the media, globalists, and the government bureaucracy. The days that immediately followed the acceptance of Elon's offer were extraordinarily telling. With the suppression of free speech lifted, people returned to Twitter in droves. Those on the right experienced a sharp and sudden gain in followers, while those from the establishment and the corporate media saw a sharp and sudden decline in their follower count as bot activity fell off. Conservative voices and the voices of those in favor of free speech were suddenly much louder, reflecting something closer to their true power. Issues such as Hunter's laptop, the election results, and vaccines were once again being discussed openly, including by Elon himself. And that was exactly the problem. It's why the establishment has feared Elon's purchase offer, and it's why they've amplified their attacks on him.
The timing of the creation of Biden's new Ministry of Truth is notable in light of Elon's purchase of Twitter. But the Biden regime's choice of the ministry's head is even more remarkable. If you had intentionally set out to find the most unqualified, most controversial, and most hyper-partisan person in all of the United States to head up the new Ministry of Truth, you couldn't have done much better than Biden's choice, Nina Jankowicz. Jankowicz literally symbolizes the opposite of truth. She's also been a huge fan of lockdowns, going so far as calling herself a lockdown evangelist. At one point, Jankowicz even amalgamated lockdowns and Russiagate, suggesting that anyone who questioned either was a fanatic. Unsurprisingly, Yankowicz is a huge fan of masks, despite a total lack of evidence that masks made any difference whatsoever. Yankowicz also condescendingly whitewashed Joe Biden's firing of Ukraine's prosecutor Viktor Shokin, an issue that we've covered previously on our show.
As a result, the vice president delivered a message that Shokin needed to be fired and other reforms pursued if Ukraine wanted its next tranche of IMF funds and a U.S. loan guarantee. This is called diplomacy, not extortion. That's it. Now you can get back to your Netflix and your Zoom happy hours and lots of washing your hands.
More recently, Yankowicz was also a huge proponent of the election-altering lie that was put out by 5 former CIA directors who falsely claimed that Hunter Biden's laptop was a Russian plot. As if all that wasn't bad enough, Yankowicz is also a former advisor to the Ukrainian government and a global fellow at the far-left Wilson Center. Leaving aside the many questions that surround the Biden administration's Orwellian creation of their Ministry of Truth, what does it say about the Biden regime that they chose the most extreme and caricature-like person to head their new project?
Although anything is possible, it's hard to imagine that Yankowicz will withstand congressional or public scrutiny. But she certainly managed to serve as a lightning rod to center attention. Given her utter lack of credentials, it's possible that she was picked as a means to distract from the many other issues faced by Biden. It's also possible that her true purpose is to distract from other steps the Biden administration and the DNC are taking. It's certainly noteworthy that discussions about Yankowicz have sucked up most of the oxygen among Biden opponents this past week. It may simply be yet another catastrophic failure of bumbling leadership that led to the formation of Biden's new Ministry of Truth, as well as the choice of its head. What we do know for sure is that the establishment is reeling from the prospect of a return to free speech and the prospect of losing their control over narrative formation. It's important to point out that it's not simply a matter of Democrats and the media who seek to control our nation's narrative. It's the permanent members of government itself, in particular, the intelligence community, along with members of the codified bureaucracy. We've seen repeated evidence of their influence, whether it was through the promotion of the 2003 Iraq War under false pretenses, or more recently, through Fauci's direct interference with what people could and could not say on social media about the virus's origin or about vaccines and masks.